Good evening, and thank you for joining me, Sam Paton, this evening at Scotland at 7. And once again, as you can see, I'm broadcasting live from my living room. And this evening, I have an amazing guest. His first time on the show, Scott Bevan, who is a Scottish Green.
Hello.
From Paisley and the west of Scotland. Hi, Scott, how are you doing?
Yes, I'm okay. Not too bad. Just in from campaigning. My son is in
We'll
there
talk
watching
about that.
Rapunzel and Hilda.
Oh, your son is absolutely amazing. Absolutely a wee cutie. Right,
Yes,
we're going to head
beautiful.
on. Yes. Right, so we're going to head on quickly with the show and start with the coronavirus update for this evening, and then we'll sit and have a chat with Scotland Today's News. As of 2 p.m. today, there are 132 new cases of COVID-19 confirmed by a test, although not everyone with the virus will display symptoms, and not all those with symptoms will be tested. There has been no reported deaths of people who have tested positive today. The number of patients in Scotland have died from complication caused by the coronavirus infection now stands at 7,660. This number only includes those who have died having received a positive test for the virus in the previous 28 days. As of 8 a.m. this morning, 2,824,955 people have received their first dose of COVID-19 vaccination, and 1,326,599 have received their second dose of the vaccination. As today is a public holiday, today's update will only provide headline statistics on new cases, deaths and vaccinations. The full data will be updated tomorrow. The latest UK daily figures show 127,539 patients who tested positive for COVID-19 have sadly died from their illness, an increase of one since yesterday. This number refers to deaths in all settings and not just hospitals. And our thoughts are with all those families and loved ones who have sadly lost someone. Now we're going to move on swiftly onto the election news. And the first story is Nicola Sturgeon says COVID recovery is her first priority. With a set of decisions about COVID and a potential relaxation of the rules, including on meeting people in private homes, to be made just days after the election, First Minister Nicola Sturgeon urged voters not to take a chance on Scotland's progress, as she asked voters to back her for First Minister. The next review of COVID restrictions, which could see society open up further on the 17th of May, is due to take place immediately after the election. The SNP said that Nicola Sturgeon's experienced leadership will be essential for Scotland as the country emerges from the pandemic. As you can see, I haven't put my teeth in this evening, but we'll get there. Nicola Sturgeon said that the first job of a newly elected government will be to decide on whether the country is ready to lift restrictions even further on the 17th of May. Ms Sturgeon said that she is confident the country is on the right track and will be able to take further steps to free up society and allow the economy to begin to recover. She said that infection levels are low, and with over 60% of people in Scotland have had their first dose of vaccine and 1.3 million have been now second dose, Scotland is moving in the right direction and we must all protect that progress. Now, Scott, how have you been finding campaigning during the COVID? Because obviously this has been a different way of campaigning for everybody. It's been a new experience. So how are you finding campaigning?
Yes, it has been very different. And I'm saying that as somebody who has never stood before. So this is the first time that I've ever stood. So in some ways you could say, well, I've never known anything else. But of course, I've followed politics all my life. I've always been interested in it, and I studied it at uni, along with my journalism and media and politics. So it's something that I've always been interested in, and I've never known a campaign like it, I have to say. So it's been strange to be, the first ever time that I stood, maybe the only time that I'll ever stand, who knows? But certainly the first ever time that I've stood. And we've kind of come into this pandemic situation that we've been in for a year that we were sure was going to be over by now.
Yeah.
And of course it's not. So yeah, it's impacted, I think, quite a lot on campaigning. There are some parties who have still been out canvassing, knocking doors, etc.
Yeah.
But we've decided not to do that as a party. We made the decision not to do that because we thought not only is it probably unsafe at this point, but also it's not going to go down very well on the doorsteps if people have been told for over a year that you can't see friends and family, you can't go to the pub, you can't hug your friends. And then as soon as restrictions start to ease just a tiny little bit, they've got politicians knocking on their door saying, hi, come vote for us. So we thought, well, the best thing to do is just to not do that. But in not doing that, especially when we are standing more candidates than ever before, we're not able necessarily to reach the people that we might have thought we might have been able to reach in the same way. So we don't really know how the campaign's going on the ground. On a constituency level anyway, we have no idea because we don't get to talk to people in the same way. We run into people and we can chat to them, but it's not the same. So I think that's certainly hampered campaigning a little bit, not being able to do the canvassing, but for sensible reasons. We've decided not to do it. The SNP, I think, now have also decided not to do it as well.
Yeah, I don't think they've been shutting doors either, have they? Yeah.
No, I think they started to, and then they stopped.
Yeah, for the same reasons, because it isn't very fair, and I've had a few from other parties chap on my door, and when you haven't seen friends and family, it's not, it's a wee bit kind of cheeky. So when it comes to Thursday and everybody goes out to vote, if you were to offer them a bit of advice for keeping themselves safe going to vote, what would you be advising people going to the polling stations? Because there is going to be people out there that are going to be quite apprehensive about going to the polling stations on Thursday.
Yeah, I mean, just wear your mask and socially distance. I mean, I think that there was a suggestion for a while of them introducing electronic machines to do the voting. That's not a goer, as far as I'm aware. That's not going ahead. And I think that's probably the best decision because we've never done that in this country and there'll be all sorts of problems with it. It's such a crucial election. So I think just sort of be safe and be socially distanced. Do go out and vote. If you feel unwell, then you can get a proxy vote. So if you feel unwell on the day, then you can get someone else to go along and do it for you, but you have to phone them up. Phone up the council and explain that to them.
And that's a good bit of advice because people don't realise they can do a proxy vote. So that's a really good bit of advice for people, especially those that might end up waking up with COVID symptoms and having to self-isolate and they're worried that they can get someone to do that.
Yeah.
So who did the phone, Scott? Is it their local council?
Take a pen.
Yeah.
So you can phone your local council and they'll sort it out for you. But I think that local councils might be fielding quite a lot of calls actually on the day. So just try and make sure if you do feel unwell, if you think like the night before that you don't feel well, then try and get it sorted then. I mean, you can do it online as well. So it's one of these things. It's not something that we've had to worry about as much in the past. Proxy votes were all, people knew if they were going to have a proxy vote and it was all sorted. And most people who knew about proxy votes were the people who it was affecting. But I think this time's going to be different because there's going to be people who on the day might go, I feel a wee bit unwell. Should I not go? And the advice is, well, yes, really, but you should still vote, and I hope that you do still vote. And if that's the case, that you do feel unwell, then try and get a proxy vote. There have obviously been more people than ever doing postal ballots as well, although not quite as many as we might have thought.
Quite a lot. Yeah, there's been quite a few because I've been noticing on social media a lot of people doing the postal votes as well. So, but yeah, please go out and vote. Now we're going to swiftly move on to the next story. And again, sticking with the election, this time with the Scottish Green Party. The Scottish Greens pledged tougher protection for wildlife. The Scottish Greens have committed to strengthening protections for wildlife and making sure they are enforced. The party say that current protections have failed and are poorly enforced. Within a year of beavers being declared a protected species, a fifth of the population was killed under licence from Nature Scotland. The Scottish Government agency charged with protecting wildlife and birds of prey continue to disappear or to be found killed near Scotland's grouse moors. The Scottish Greens manifesto pledges to review the priorities of Nature Scotland and other agencies, strengthen licensing, end blood sports, ban cruel traps like glue traps and snares, and deliver a fully resourced wildlife crime investigations unit in the Police Scotland. Now, Scott, I know this will be close to you, and this is kind of close to my heart as well in terms of the protection for wildlife. I know this morning when I was driving to my work, when I'm driving over Carman Hill, there's a kite that it seems to pass me in the mornings, flying around, looking for its breakfast. And these birds of prey, these animals, whether it's mammals, mean so much to our ecological environment, our system in Scotland. And people always think that we've got all these protections in place, but there's so many loopholes in the law that the grouse lands and things, and they're getting away, and licences are being issued. So, your thoughts on this? Personal thoughts on what's been happening and what obviously the Scottish Greens are going to be proposing?
Well, that's absolutely true. I mean, we are facing a climate emergency, okay, and we've known this for some time now, but we are also facing, on top of that, a nature emergency. These two things go hand in hand. And the nature that we have in Scotland, the beautiful nature that we have in Scotland, all these wonderful animals and, all the environment that we have here is under threat by the same forces and the same factors that are causing the mass inequality and the poverty in this country. Okay, it's neoliberal capitalism. It comes down to that, and the same people who are in control of these grouse moors, etc., these fox hunts, which are still going on. These are the very people who are keeping things out of the hands of the Scottish public and who are ensuring that we are still tied to an economic model that does not assist the majority of people, and of course often as well to a union that does not serve the majority of people. So I think that in terms of fox hunting, I mean, you'll probably remember way back in 1997 when Labour came in and they vowed to ban fox hunting, right? This is a long time ago. I was a young child, okay, so it was a very long time ago.
Don't rub it in. They came in.
But I remember it. No, but I remember because obviously I've been interested in this, as I say, all my life. So I remember it as well, and that's something that I thought, oh, brilliant. That's great. They're going to ban fox hunting, and then in 2002, I think it was, they did ban fox hunting, and again, fantastic. We all celebrated. It was one of those things that people went, that shows that Labour, care about the people. They care about addressing the inequality and helping the environment and stuff like that. Back in 2002, this is before Iraq, before people's views on New Labour changed quite considerably, including my own. But at that point, we thought, fantastic. This is a really great thing, but it's not really worked out in the way that we thought that it had, and because we don't see it, we don't see fox hunts because most of us are not upper class, riding around on our horses around country estates, so we don't know that this still goes on really, but it does, and it goes on in Scotland, and it goes on quite considerably more in England, and this is 20 years later now almost, and fox hunting continues basically the same as it used to. There's still mounted fox hunts, and we've been trying to stop that. I mean, Alison Johnson, our MSP for Lothians, has published detailed proposals that would deliver the watertight ban that we do need. And we will deliver this legislation in the next Parliament if we get enough MSPs in there to do that. So that's one of the things, certainly, that we're trying to do. But also the grouse shooting. Now, grouse shooting is something that impacts not just on the environment, but also on the economic situation as well, because we've got all this land that's owned by, these very rich landowners, and they open it up to grouse shooting because they know they can make an awful lot of money off of rich people coming and doing that on their land, right? And that's why they are absolutely loath to let go of the grouse shooting or to stop it happening. They also kill other species to make sure that the grouse are able to thrive, so that there's mostly grouse in these areas. So they killed other species, as you said. You pointed that out. Yeah. There's other species that are being killed around these grouse moors as well. And they use toxic lead ammunition when shooting and stuff like that as well. So, I mean, none of it's good. None of it's good for the environment, and we all know that it's not good for the environment, okay? But what we need to do is we need to take it out of the hands of these people. I mean, that's why socialism and the ecological impact go hand in hand. They really do, because what we could do is we could turn this back over to the people of Scotland, and we could be using it, for things like carbon capture. And when I say carbon capture, I don't mean big machines that are created down in London or whatever. I'm talking about nature's carbon capture, trees. This is what we're talking about. We need to rewild a lot of Scotland, and grouse moors is a perfect example of ancient woodland, ancient areas, ancient moors, where we can take that land and we can use it for the people of Scotland. We can create new national parks. We want to create at least 2 new national parks in Scotland for the people of Scotland, and use the rest of the land to the betterment of the rest of the country, rather than it being hoarded by an elite few who use it to damage the environment and for their own, I would say, bloodthirsty ends.
And the thing is, what people don't realise as well, if the land goes back to the people of Scotland and an independent Scotland, then people can move back into these areas, and that starts the growth in these areas as well, economic growth in these areas as well as the environmental growth as well. So there's 2 sides of this argument as well. So when we're not just tree huggers, it can be done, sustainable economy as well. So right, we're going to.
What we need to do is we need to get it licensed so that we can keep it under control. Okay, because it's gotten out of control. Okay, so that's the first step.
It has,
right? Ultimately, what we want to do is take a lot of this land back into public ownership, ideally, right? But that is something that's not going to happen overnight. Okay, we have to be honest about that. But what we do need to do is have it licensed, have it properly regulated, have it controlled, and make sure that the most harmful practices are dealt with, and to ban fox hunting outright, because that is something that we can do and should do in the next parliament.
Definitely. Right, we're sticking with the election, and we're talking about dear. Murray Ross, or Douglas Ross as he's known, says Boris Johnson should resign if he breached ministerial rules. Douglas Ross, the leader of the Scottish Conservatives, said in a flustered response to questioning on the Andrew Marr show yesterday that Johnson should of course quit if he is found to have breached the ministerial code by failing to be honest about cash payments from a Conservative donor sought to redecorate his official residence. His gaffe will have not endeared him to Boris Johnson, and seems to have caught number 10 by surprise after the Prime Minister was accused of successfully obtaining funds for the flat from a second donor, while a third was alleged to have been asked to pay for his 1-year-old son's care. It comes as the party attempts to move on from a torrid week and gears up for elections on Thursday. The SNP has said that Boris Johnson must come clean and stop dodging legitimate questions over the growing Tory sleaze scandal after the Prime Minister repeatedly refused to answer direct questions from journalists today. In an interview with broadcasters in Hartlepool, Johnson was asked a series of questions about his personal conduct and refused to answer any of them. Asked twice whether Tory donors were asked to pay for his childcare, he refused to answer. Asked whether there was a second invoice for the Downing Street flat refurbishment, paid for by someone else? Again, the Prime Minister refused to answer. Asked whether he would resign if found guilty of wrongdoing, the Prime Minister once again refused to answer. Asked whether he would take the opportunity to put questions and concerns around Downing Street flat refurbishment to bed, he refused to answer again. Meanwhile, on the campaign trail in Scotland today, despite having constantly refused to say how Scotland can dramatically get involved in a second independence referendum since the start of the campaign, the Scottish Conservatives tweeted that the SNP majority is a guarantee for another independence referendum. It now seems that you just can't, Colin. Now, Scott, what's your feelings on...
Well,
I'm sorry, I find it very hard to read a story with Douglas Ross and Boris Johnson keeping a straight face, because
absolutely.
They try to put across the fact they're 100% legit and they're doing things right, and you know fine well they're at it. So go on, give us your impression on that, Scott.
Well, listen, firstly I'm going to need to point out that it's not necessarily just an SNP majority, but an independence majority. Okay, so It doesn't make any difference either way. So for those who think that, it's only the SNP majority that will make any difference, only the votes make the difference. Okay, so if we have the same amount of votes with an SNP majority as we would with more Greens in there, it's the same thing, right? But the chances are, if you're not having an SNP majority, and you actually have more Greens, so we will have more independent support in MSPs if we have more Greens in Parliament, which means voting Green on the list. I think he was backed in a corner on this, really, wasn't he? Which is good. I mean that's good. Andrew Marr doing his job, which is great. But yeah, I think he was backed into a corner because, of course, he would have been accused of hypocrisy after everything that he said about Nicola Sturgeon resigning and about John Swinney resigning for breaking the ministerial codes. He can't then say that Boris Johnson, who is accused of breaking the ministerial code, can then stay. You can't get away with that. So
Boris Johnson is his pal. I mean, Boris Johnson knows him affectionately as Murray Ross, so they're buddies.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what can I say? That Marie Antoinette was trending on Twitter over the last couple of weeks. Don't know if you've seen that. So it's people who are calling Boris Johnson's partner, Carrie, however you want to say it. Basically referencing Marie Antoinette and Let Them Eat Cake, and saying that she's the same as that, saying to people that they should go to food banks and all the rest of it, while they're getting donors and the taxpayer to pay for exorbitant and lavish furnishings for their flat because they thought that John Lewis was too working class for them.
Yeah, but the thing is, have you seen the photographs? They are a bit not very classy.
Imperialist. They're imperialist.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. I saw it, and it looked like something out of the Raj's palace in India over 100 years ago. That's what it looked like. But that's just my personal opinion on the artwork. And I have to say my partner's personal opinion on the artwork as well. And she's a textile designer, so that was our opinion on it. But yeah, that's neither here nor there what we think about what he's actually done. I mean, if he'd done that with the allowance that he is given to do that, no one would have cracked a light. It's the fact that he's doing it with not just extra taxpayers' money, but he's asking people basically for a crowdfunder to fund his lifestyle, because he's saying that being Prime Minister, he doesn't get paid enough to live.
It's just obscene, isn't it? It's just obscene
when from somebody sitting in a tenement in Paisley, who really is kind of struggling to live. That would rankle, I think, with a lot of people in the Red Wall areas that voted for him at the last election because of Brexit. So you would think that would work in Labour's favour. However, Keir Starmer isn't exactly doing Labour any favours at the moment either.
No, none of them are. None of them are. Right, we're going to move on to the next story. SNP warn that Rishi Sunak is set to impose more austerity on Scotland. The SNP has accused UK Chancellor Rishi Sunak of being one of the biggest threats to Scotland's recovery, as he is posed to impose years of austerity on Scotland. It comes after Sunak joined his boss, Boris Johnson, in denying the democratic wishes of the people of Scotland in the Scottish Daily Mail. The Chancellor seemed to imply that the UK was economically dependent on Scotland, saying that a referendum on Scottish independence would put Britain's economic recovery from COVID-19 pandemic at risk. Commenting, SNP Deputy Leader Keith Brown said, "We cannot trust the Tories to do the right thing for Scotland's economy." And Rishi Sunak has already set out his post-COVID budget, which will see a return to crippling Tory austerity. Now, Scott, reading this in the story here, the Greens will agree that, they're about to impose more austerity in Scotland. And you've got to laugh about the report of denying the democratic wishes in the Scottish Daily Mail, which is not really a Scottish paper, really. But at least they're admitting that the UK is economically dependent on Scotland. What's your opinion on that one?
Well, I think that you would be forgiven for thinking that the Conservative Party wants Scotland to leave the UK. I mean, why else would they be trying their absolute damnedest to not only deny the democracy of Scotland, but also to ensure that our economy is crippled further and further when it has already been crippled by Tory austerity for the past 10 years. And that's the reason, primarily, that a lot of people want Scottish independence, people who previously didn't, who now want Scottish independence because of what we've had to put up with. Now, there is a better way, and it's about priorities. I know I've said it before, but poverty is not economic, really. It's ideological. It's a society that decides that the top few percent should live in richness and healthiness and power and exclusivity, and that everybody else should just about struggle to get by, and those who are getting by a wee bit better should be too scared to rock the boat. So it's a hierarchy. It's a hierarchy, and it's something that in Scotland we reject consistently. I mean, we do have a more economically left-wing, not necessarily socially left-wing, I have to say, but certainly economically left-wing outlook on the world and on our place in it. And we always have done. And you only need to look at the Citizens' Assembly on tax that we had just before the pandemic to see that that's true. I mean, even people who said that they were conservative-minded were voting for things like universal basic income and upping taxes on the rich and, scrapping the council tax, etc., because that's the kind of things that are really going to make a difference to the majority of people in Scotland, and we understand that. Greens understand that, as do many other people, but certainly the Greens have been pushing for this for a very long time, and it seems as though people are starting to wake up now, I'd say, to the fact that we are never going to get any progressive future in the UK anymore. That ship sailed. That's gone. I mean, it was gone long before Jeremy Corbyn was forced out. It was gone long before that. But certainly now, it should be clear to most people that we are on a trajectory that the Tories have been taking us down for the past 10 years. That is racist. That is sexist. That is very, very damaging to working people and to our rights. And, of course, with Brexit, which is also an attempt to enshrine the hierarchy that we already have and to make that even worse. And Scotland says no to that. Scotland said no to Brexit. Scotland says no to the Tories and has done since 1955. So we're not going to put up with it much longer, and that is the truth of it. You will find at this election that whatever makeup we have in the Parliament, there will be a strong, strong appetite for a second independence referendum, and we will fight for that all the way.
Yeah, definitely. Now move on to The next story, Boris Johnson says social distancing rule in England could go in June. England is on course to ditch the COVID-19 social distancing rule requiring people to stay at least 1 metre apart towards the end of next month, Boris Johnson said today. The UK government has set out a roadmap to end England's lockdown restrictions in stages as widespread vaccinations help to suppress infections, and June the 21st has been set as a date when social distancing could end. The next stage of the government's unlocking plans is May the 17th, when the restrictions on foreign travel are expected to be eased but not lifted. The Scottish Government has called for a four-nations approach to easing the travel restrictions. However, it seems likely that the UK Government will go further than the more cautious Scottish Government will want. Now, Scott, I was kind of saying a wee bit about this afternoon when I got home. And even in Europe, when you see the countries in Europe taking a more cautious approach about easing lockdowns, they're doing it step by step, keeping an eye on the numbers, on the infection rates, even though they've all now got the vaccination plans and set in motion. But the UK government just seems to be steaming ahead that wee bit quicker. How do you think? I just have the feeling of caution in my gut. How about you? How are you feeling about this?
I mean, look, the step-by-step approach, I think, is the right way to do it. Don't get me wrong, I am desperate for the lockdown to end. I am desperate to actually get out and get involved in the economy again, to actually go to a pub again, go to karaoke. I'm desperate for it, right? But at the same time, we need to actually...
Right, a wee secret, everybody, about Scott with these karaoke. He used to be in a boy band, so that's why he's mentioning karaoke.
Yeah. That is true.
I had to get that in, Scott. Sorry.
No, it's fair enough, right? But yeah, don't get me wrong, as I said, I think everyone's desperate for it to end after a year of this, and the mental health crisis is just getting out of control. It's going to be just as bad as COVID in many ways after this pandemic has passed. However, that said, the step-by-step approach is obviously the way to do this. We do not want to end up in the same situation that India is in right now. I mean, you just need to look over to India to see how bad things can be.
I know, that's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
That is absolutely heartbreaking over there.
It's awful, and I mean, we've been here before, right? At the start of lockdown, we thought, it's only going to last maybe a month, and then we thought, okay, maybe it's going to last 3 months, and then after 3 months they started to ease things, and we thought, okay, well, it's not going to go back. Obviously, by the time next summer comes around, everything will be back to normal. And then, of course, there was a second variant, and everything went back into lockdown again. We had Christmas, opened up a little bit, shut down again. So we've been here before. Now, if I was in Parliament, I have to say, it would be difficult to see how another lockdown would be supported by the public. I think that would be very, very difficult. And I think it would need to have a vote in Parliament before we could pass that. But let's hope we don't have to go there. And the reason that we might end up having to go there again is if we rush it, if we go too soon, But it's no surprise to hear that Boris Johnson's pushing for this. I mean, Boris Johnson didn't want any kind of lockdown to begin with. He wanted us all to take it on the chin. And, he's been allegedly saying that he would rather that he saw the bodies pile high than have another lockdown. Now whether that's true or it isn't, the fact that so many people believe that, he probably did say that, and he probably did think that, because he's of the same sort of mindset as all of your right-wing leaders like Bolsonaro and Donald Trump and, all these people who basically wanted to do the same thing. They weren't interested in closing the economy because it would hurt their rich friends. Now, what has happened is that it hasn't harmed the rich at all. It's harmed the small businesses. And that's something that the Greens want to rectify. We want to introduce a one-off tax on the super rich who have made obscene profits during this pandemic, your Amazons and all the rest of it, and we want to tax them a big amount because they can afford it, it's not going to make any difference to them whatsoever, and use that to help fuel the recovery and to help small businesses. That's something that only the Greens are proposing to do, which I'm actually very surprised at, because you would have thought Labour, the Lib Dems, SNP would all have got on board with something similar to that, but they don't seem to be too keen on it.
Well, you never know when it comes to the next Parliament. You might find that they might,
yeah.
because
if we push them on it, if we have enough MSPs.
Some of these companies have made a mint during the pandemic, while the small businesses have really suffered. Right, staying within the same lines, we're moving on to the next story. An all-party parliamentary group on coronavirus calls for curbs on international travel to stop the COVID variants. The cross-party group, made up of over 60 MPs and peers, has urged the government to introduce stricter checks at airports and curbs on international travel to prevent COVID cases being imported into the UK, including new variants that could evade current vaccines. In a report published today, the all-party parliamentary group, the APPG, on coronavirus called on ministers to discourage all but essential overseas travel and introduce a stronger protections against COVID-19 at the UK's borders. It sets out a series of recommendations to ensure that hard-won progress in tackling the virus is not lost and mistakes of the past are not repeated. The report is based on evidence received at the APPG's hearing with expert witnesses on Tuesday, the 20th of April 2021. The session heard how airports are becoming a breeding ground for the virus, with people arriving from red, amber and green list countries often mixing in overcrowded arrival halls. Notably, one of the witnesses questioned in the hearing said they would be prepared to travel internationally in the near future. Today's APPG report calls on the UK government to maintain curbs on international leisure travel beyond the 17th of May to prevent new variants entering the UK and reduce the risk of a deadly third wave and further lockdowns. It says this policy should be reviewed on a quarterly basis and that in the meantime the government must provide adequate financial support to businesses within the travel industry. It comes after the latest figures from the Public Health England this week showed the number of cases of the Indian variant have trebled to over 400 in the past week, with the vast majority of cases linked to international travel. Dr. Philippa Whitford MP, Vice Chair of the APPG on coronavirus, said, "Our cross-party inquiry has heard how the UK's border management is acting more like a sieve than a shield, and in the fight against the coronavirus. Ministers must act on these recommendations and learn from the mistakes made last year when the premature reopening of international travel contributed to a second wave." Now, Scott, that's pretty much what we've just been talking about. It's about not making the same mistakes as we've already made. And one of the mistakes that's been made in the past is international travel. And with the looks of things, we could possibly end up, and again, this comes down to Scotland having control of its own borders, which we do not have. That is Westminster. And if we had control of our own borders, we'd be able to do that. What do you say about that one? I can guess.
Well, that said, we do have control to an extent over the airports. And some of this should have been done at the start. Okay, some of this should have been done at the very, very start of the pandemic. Now, leisure travel was stopped. International leisure travel was stopped. But business travel was still going on. You still had people coming in at the height of the pandemic, from the places most heavily affected. That should not have happened. Right? Now, I don't know what situation we'd have been in if we'd have sorted all that out at the time and we'd have done what New Zealand had done. A lot of the things that New Zealand had done. They are now COVID-free, But I think it would have been a situation now where we would have been out of lockdown. That's what I think would be the case. We wouldn't have had any kind of restrictions potentially now if we'd have done all these things at the start. And it's okay to say that in hindsight. What we need to do now is just focus on how we go forward, So I think that, it is sensible, it is the right thing to do, but we should be asking questions about why it wasn't done sooner.
Yeah. Definitely. I think when all this is over and done with, there certainly needs to be a lot of questions asked about why certain decisions were made. Now,
Yeah.
on
And
to the
people are
next
desperate
story.
to go on
So,
holiday. Like, I get that. I get that. I get
yeah,
people are desperate to go on holiday. Sorry for interrupting. I get people are
no,
desperate
you're
to
fine.
go abroad and go on holiday after, again, as I say, over a year of the
Mhm.
toughest time that many of us have ever faced. But it's one of these things that you just have to put the public interest first, and you have to say, well, look, there's plenty of lovely places in Scotland, in England, that you can go on holiday. I mean, we are going to go up to St Andrews for a wee few days, right? So
Yeah,
we're doing that. We're going to go to Edinburgh, and we're going to go to St Andrews, and that's our holiday. And we don't really go abroad holidays that much anyway, but you know, try and just rediscover your own country for a wee while. And
a
I
wee
don't
while
see
longer.
why
Yeah.
people have got such an issue with that. Where I do have sympathy, though, of course, is people who have relatives in other countries who are missing them, who haven't seen them in a year and a half, etc. That is tough. That is really tough,
That is
especially
really
if you've got a
tough.
son or
Yeah.
daughter or mother who lives in Canada or wherever. Yeah, like I get that. Um, but it is one of those things that we're just going to have to put up with for just a little bit longer, so that we don't have to put up with it for years longer. You know?
It's a wee sacrifice short term, so
Yeah.
we don't need to make the sacrifices long term. Right, now on to the next story. Sir Geoffrey Donaldson launches his campaign to become the DUP leader. Sir Geoffrey Donaldson has announced a bid to become the next leader of the Democratic Unionist Party and by extension become the next First Minister of Northern Ireland. In Belfast today, the MP for Lagan Valley said he would square off against Edwin Poots, I think that's Poots, or the Agricultural Minister, creating the first leadership contest in the party's 50-year history. Donaldson, 58, paid tribute to outgoing leader Arlene Foster and said he stood for the politics of persuasion, a coded reference to centre ground voters who could decided any referendum on a united Ireland. Donaldson's entry into the race gives DUP starkly different leadership choices at a crossroads for the party and Northern Ireland. The party's Westminster leader has cast himself as a moderate, unifying figure who could heal fractures in the party and appeal to a broad base of voters. Scott, what's your view on the next DUP leader? I'm afraid it's something that I've not really kind of paid attention to.
Yeah.
So, I
Listen, I
mean,
don't know
DUP
anything
is
about
one of
Jeffrey
these
Donaldson,
parties.
so
No, I don't know who he is either.
yeah. So I don't know anything about him, right? I have to say, I don't know. Well, I mean, I've heard the name, right? But I don't know anything about him, what he's like as a person, as a politician. But it just seems really sad that Arlene Foster, who to us seems like about as far right as you can go within the UK, you know? I mean,
Hmm.
she doesn't seem like somebody who's on the liberal side of anything, but to many in the DUP, she did seem as though she was a liberal for not coming out and opposing a ban on conversion therapy and many other things. That is really, really tragic to see that, you know. And I don't know where Northern Ireland go from here. I think that Scottish independence would help. I have to say, Scottish independence back in the EU, independence in the EU.
Hmm.
I think that would help. I really do, and I think that that would help solve some of the issues surrounding the border. But I
Yeah.
don't see the peaceful path necessarily towards um, a border poll. I think that border poll is inevitable, but I don't see how they necessarily get there. If I did, I'd probably be up for a UN Peace Prize, you know. But I don't.
Yeah.
There's a lot of historical issues there, obviously, that need to be unpacked, and there's also the people who are most likely to get involved in any kind of riots or violence, however, are actually far less involved in the sort of sectarian violence, the sort of sectarian religious arguments that maybe their parents were. but they're still part of the communities. It's a split community. It's not so much about religion now as it is about those communities. And one community tends to be unionist and one community tends to be pro-Ireland. And that seems to be, it's more about that than it is about religion. And perhaps it was always more about that than it is about religion. I'm no expert on Northern Ireland, so I can't really speak to that. But it does, I always worry about the situation over there. I remember the peace process in the late 90s when I was a kid, and we thought, oh, this is fantastic. Look what's going on over there. Look at the Labour government that's coming in and helping sort out all these issues that have been there for years and years and years. Isn't this great? And we thought it would last naively, but sadly it was never going to as soon as Brexit was on the cards.
Yeah, unfortunately it kind of reared its head again, didn't it? But again, that was because it wasn't dealt with properly. A lot of the issues weren't dealt with properly, and again, that's a failing of Westminster if we dealt with it properly. Right, we're moving over to America now. We're kind of going a wee bit international now. Biden to start reunifying migrant families separated by Trump. This week, the United States will see a small step forward, fulfilling a campaign promise by President Joe Biden as US officials prepare to reunite 4 of the migrant families separated at the US-Mexico border during the Trump administration. The families will be allowed to enter the United States through an emergency process known as humanitarian parole. Michelle Brand, who heads the President Biden's task force to reunite separated families, told reporters yesterday. The US Department of Homeland Security is considering whether they could be granted longer-term immigration status, she said. President Biden has called family separations under Trump a human tragedy. Just very quickly, your opinion on this, Scott? I mean, this was just, I remember this happening when seeing this on, media with Trump, and the way it was just absolutely horrifying how he just felt that this was acceptable. But it's good to see Biden.
It's really good to see. It's good to see a lot of the things that Biden has done actually since coming in. I mean, I'm actually surprised, I have to say, because I thought that he was more of a sort of traditional moderate Democrat, sort of centre-right, because everything in the US is skewed right. And yet he has been okay for progressives so far. I mean, he's had Bernie Sanders and as chairman of the budget committee, and he's been listening to the proposals put forward by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, etc. And he has actually been far more liberal, if that's the word, than we would have expected. So I think that it's great, and obviously this is just human. It's just needed, isn't it? I mean, I can't believe that there'd be any Democratic president that would come in and would not say that these families have to be reunited. So it's just the thing that we knew that he was going to do. But it is fantastic, to see that he's actually far more progressive so far than we feared that he possibly would be, and he's doing a lot for the environment, if you can believe any of the climate targets that he's agreed to set.
Yeah, I know he's so far it's been good news mostly.
So far so good. Right, so far so okay.
Yeah, so far. Yeah, we're kind of watching this space, but we're keeping an eye on it. Now we're staying with the US.
It'd be great if he agreed to Medicare for all, but
Yeah, we could never know. We're kind of still early days yet, but we'll keep.
Kamala Harris, the second term, really.
Yeah. Right, now for the next story. 9 major US sports unions join forces to oppose voter suppression laws. 9 major US sports unions have joined together on Monday to declare their opposition to state legislation efforts restricting the right to vote. I need to get the teeth back in. A number of voting right groups say restrictions passed by Georgia target black people and other racial minorities are being considered in Texas and Arizona and other states. The statement was co-signed by the National Basketball Players Association, the Basketball Players Union, Major League Soccer Players Association, National Football League Players Association, and the United States Women's National Team Players Association, along with players' bodies representing elite-level women's ice hockey, soccer and basketball. The Republican-backed Georgia law strengthened identification requirements for absentee ballots, shortened early voting periods for runoffs, and made it a misdemeanor for members of the public to offer food and water to voters waiting in line. The sports unions said they were joining hundreds of individuals and corporations in taking a stand for democracy. Scott, even just reading this here, I'm just going, they're making it a misdemeanor for members of the public to offer food and water to voters waiting in line. They're wanting to strengthen identification requirements.
Voter ID is always voter suppression, right? That's what it is.
Yeah,
voter
definitely.
ID is voter suppression, right? For voter ID, see voter suppression. Okay, so that plus the fact that they have just made it so clear that we do not want people to vote because we don't want you to stand in long lines. When you stand in long lines, you're not allowed to be fed, you're not allowed to be watered. It's dictatorial in the extreme. So, yeah, I mean, everyone should come out in support of opposing that, you know. And I'm glad that so many unions, sports unions of people who, you know, are really the elite in society, and they're getting involved to turn around and say, look, we are not okay with that, you know. That's, and I think a lot of it is because it's racial as well.
Yeah, and it would be quite good as well if more of our sports associations done similar, because what we get here is a lot of them putting their name to things, but they don't actually come out and take action. So it would be good for them to take a leaf out of this book and do the same. You know, similar.
It's a bit more than performative, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite good.
Performative opposition doesn't always help. Doesn't usually help. And this seems to be a bit more strident than that. And yeah, I'm very pleased with it. When I read it the other day, I read something about it, and I didn't have much time to read it because I've been out campaigning and stuff. So I just sort of skimmed through. But I thought, oh, that's fantastic. You know, thank goodness. And it's one of those things where you wonder whether it's something that the president can maybe step in and try and do something about. But of course, they're very concerned with presidential overreach over there in America. They always have been, and with over-centralization. And that's something that Biden doesn't want to push too much. But I do wonder whether you could maybe do something more on that.
Yeah, definitely. Right, we're moving on to the last story of the evening. Barcelona church opens doors to Muslims during Ramadan and prayers and iftar. With COVID-19 restrictions preventing Barcelona's Islamic population from celebrating Ramadan at the usual indoor venues, a Catholic church has offered up its open-air cloisters. I hope I pronounced that right. Cloisters for Muslims to eat and pray together. Every evening, between 50 and 60 Muslims, many of them homeless, stream into the centuries-old stone passages of the Santa Ana Church, where volunteers offer a hearty meal of home-cooked food. During the month of Ramadan, observant Muslims do not eat between sunrise and sundown, breaking their fast only after nightfall, with a meal known as iftar. Fazio Chati, president of the Catalan Association of Moroccan Women, used to organise iftar gatherings in the city, but limits on indoor dining forced her to seek an alternative space with good ventilation and a room for distancing. She found a receptive ear in Father Pio Sanchez, Santa Ana's rector, who sees the meeting of different faiths as symbolic of civil coexistence. People are very happy that Muslims can do iftar in a Catholic church because religions serve to unite us, not separate us, says Chati. Now, Scott, this is absolutely lovely. I absolutely love this story. It's so true.
It's lovely.
It's about civic coexistence, and religions should serve to unite, not to separate. And what's your feelings? I know you've said it's lovely. It is. It's lovely, isn't it? It's a feel-good story.
It's lovely. Share it all around Northern Ireland and and everywhere else. It's really, really lovely, and it is nice to see. I'm not a religious person, but I have attended interfaith events in the past, and they've been lovely. I mean, they really, really have. And although I'm not one of these people who's going to say I'm not religious but spiritual. I'm not going to say that, but I do not necessarily discount the existence of some sort of deity, etc. We talk about it quite a lot, actually, but not. I don't agree with the personality deification of a god. Right, that's where I don't fall into that category. I think that sort of stamping an old man with a beard being dictatorial and passing down judgment is something that I have never agreed with. But I think that there are very, very many different forms of religion within these cultures. So whether you're Islamic or whether you're Christian, etc., there are so many different forms. Even within one church, right, you can find so many differing, myriad of views on the same thing. And I think it's great to see that people are just going, look, we don't really care what you believe. We just care that this matters to you, and that we will be there to support the thing that matters to you, and to help people as well who are obviously, many of whom are homeless as well, which I think is just, it's a great thing. It's a lovely thing, and we could learn a lot from it, and we could do more of that here in this country and across the UK.
Definitely, it's all about spreading the love, and I'm going to get spiritual on you. It's all about spreading the love, and that's what it's about.
Love is all you need.
Love is. I know. I spied it. The Beatles. Yeah.
I'm going to show you. I'll show you actually. Right.
See, you never know what you're going to get on this show.
These are paintings that my partner did for me and for our son, right? So when he was moving into his room, when he first came out of his crib, and he first when he first came out of his cot and he first moved into a crib, my partner did up all these lovely paintings for his room. So it's like all this lovely stuff, because she's an artist, right? This is one she did for me ages ago, and then this is for my birthday. Because I'm a huge Beatles fan, as you might be able to tell from the hair and the fact that I was a singer and all the rest of it. But yeah.
Wow. That is amazing.
I love it.
She is very talented. She is absolutely amazing. Yeah, definitely. There you go.
She took them down though. We had them up all over the house, and she took them down because she didn't want to constantly look at her own work. So after a couple of years, she took
a lot of artists
took them down.
Unfortunately, a lot of artists are like that, but no. Well, we've shared them on Broadcasting Scotland at 7. There you go. I
will tell her about it later. She'll be okay with it. She will.
Yeah, I'm sure she will be. Now, this is where I turn around and say thank you very much, Scott, for joining me this evening. I hope you, the viewers, have enjoyed tonight's show as much as I have enjoyed listening to Scott. And this is where I ask you for some help. Please, if you can afford it, we are looking for people to subscribe to the show and help us to make these amazing programmes and make others as well. If you cannot afford to subscribe, then you are our marketing team. Please share all the shows and tell your friends and family about us. Another way we are looking for your help, we are looking for volunteers to come and help us out. Whether you want to sit here and host the show and sit here in front of the camera, then please feel free to contact us. We are also looking for journalists, and if you are a budding journalist or an experienced journalist, please give us a shout. And if you fancy doing some of the technical stuff behind the scenes at our studio in Glasgow, then again, please get in contact. Even if you have never done it before and you just fancy giving it a go, give us a shout. The details are on the screen. And once again, thank you very much for joining me tonight at Scotland at 7. And please join us again tomorrow evening. And I'm not sure who. I was going to say Gordon, but it's not Gordon. Who have we got tomorrow? We have Andrew tomorrow evening, I'm getting told. So please join Andrew and his guest tomorrow evening. And thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
What distinguishes Broadcasting Scotland from a website or blog, apart from our brilliant programmes?
Hi there, I'm Gordon Ross.
are the costs we face to enable us to produce those programmes. These costs are significant and ongoing. However, our facilities are able to do so much more if only we had the staff. In the last year, some of our supporters have cancelled their subscriptions. In one way, we would prefer it if it was because they didn't like us, rather than it being because of the financial pressures which we are all under because of COVID. The really positive outcome of our fundraiser is that at a time of economic challenge in Scotland, we will use your donations to create jobs and in a small way contribute to improving the Scottish economy. If you want us to be Scotland's independent broadcaster, able to provide an alternative mainstream television platform, then please support us.
Scotland is going to be an independent country.
Just imagine what we could do if we had even 1% of the BBC Scotland channel's budget. Imagine. And then please consider turning your imagination into reality. Please support us if you can afford it.